Good evening. I wanted to dedicate today's talk, which is about the topic of Jews in Greece, the history of Greek Jews, in memory of someone maybe some of you knew, Len Newhouse. He used to help run with us the parallel service downstairs, and he was actually a Greek Jew. His last name was, before Newhouse, or I'm not sure, maybe it was his mother's last name, it was Yochanan. And he came from one of the older Greek Jewish families from Saloniki. He used to go, for those who don't know, there's downtown actually a Greek synagogue in the Lower East Side, one of the older synagogues in New York called Kehila Kedosha Yanina. And he used to be Chazan and help run the parallel services. Alan, I'm sure you remember him. Yeah, so a very, very special man. And so really we love him and we miss him. And it should be in his memory, whatever we share about Greek Jews. Also, another very important announcement. Today is Rosh Chodesh Adar, the first of Adar, which means that in exactly 2 weeks is going to be Purim. So on Tuesday night of Purim, there will be no class, but also starting next week, we're going to start, next week's class is going to be about Purim, fascinating topic, the archaeology of Purim, archaeological findings related to Purim. Then the week after will be no class because it's going to be the day of Purim. And then the weeks after that, I think it's 3 weeks after that, also a fascinating series on Passover. Getting ready for Passover, also different historical findings, and hopefully should be very, very interesting, a good way to march into the holiday of Passover. There's a famous statement of a Jewish mother who was preparing for Passover, and she, in her frustration of trying to get everything ready, she said, "Why did God have to throw the Passover Seder right in the middle of all the Passover cleaning?" So there's a lot to do to prepare for Passover, so we'll get a head start on it, Bezrat Hashem. A few weeks ago, not even maybe 1 week ago, I stood here in the room with a very, very famous Greek Jew named Dr. Albert Bourla, the head of Pfizer. And it's interesting because he spoke here on Shabbat of the Holocaust remembrance about his family story. And his story is very much the story of Greek Jews. It's a story of a community that always knew who it was. It never really had major internal divisions, which is a beautiful thing. If you look at Greek Jews, even though Greece had Jews coming from Turkey, it had Jews who came from even Hungary, from more of the Ashkenazi countries. It had many, many Jews, which actually became the dominant group from Spain, from those exiled from Spain. And it had, I'm going to speak about that group, it had what's called the Romaniot group, which is Roman Jews. There was a group of Jews that were in Greece for a very long time. I'll speak about them as well. And everyone got along in harmony. There were no real major divisions, the Reform, Orthodox, Conservative, right wing, left wing. Pretty much everyone lived together and got along. It was a very beautiful community. And on the eve of the Holocaust, there were more than 80,000 Jews in Greece, and most of whom lived in Saloniki. And so it's a beautiful community. It's interesting that the story that he shared was that his aunt, I believe, his aunt, could be aunt or great aunt, was married to a Christian man. And when the Nazis came and said that this, I'm talking about Bourla, Dr. Bourla's mom was a little girl. So Dr. Bourla's mom was a little girl, and her sister was married to a Christian man. And the Nazis convinced everyone to go on trains to a better life somewhere, and the parents went, but they didn't trust this to be the case with their little daughter, Bourla's mom, and they put her with her sister, who was living as a Christian in one of the smaller villages, and she had to stay at home. She couldn't leave the house, and one day she left the house, because it's hard to stay in the same basement for 3 years. And someone saw her, and they brought her to the Nazis, and they put her in this detention center. And her brother-in-law, the Christian man, and her sister took all the money that they had, every single penny, and they gave it to the Nazis and they to the head Nazi, and they said, look, make sure that this girl doesn't get taken with the deportations to be killed. And he said, fine. One day, and she would go every single, almost like the story of Mordechai and Esther, she would go every day to check on her sister. And one day she sees she was taken. Quickly, they run to the Nazi. They say, have you no shame? Here in Greece, if an officer doesn't keep his word, he kills himself because we're so dedicated to keeping our word. Shame on you. He said, I didn't know. He drives to the place where they're executing them locally, and he pulls Berla's mom out from the line, and her life is saved. And so sort of this idea, he said, he grew up with the belief that there's always hope and there's always a possibility, even when you're looking at the worst odds possible. So there's a very beautiful Jewish community there up until the Holocaust, where really they were decimated along with other European Jewish communities. But I think what I found most fascinating about the history of Greek Jews is it is the oldest Jewish community I'm aware of. It's the oldest Jewish diaspora. You have Jews who went to Persia, Babylon. That was an expulsion. Greek Jews are the first diaspora. When do you think Jews start living in Greece? Does anyone want to try and guess how long Jews are living in Greece? Anyone? Since the Roman times, right? That's what you would think. But actually, first of all, there's a bunch of mentions of Greece in Tanakh as early as Genesis. So it starts Ubnei Yavan. By the way, the term for Greece is Yavan, which is Ion. And a part of Greece, that's the Kihila Kedusha Ionina. Ionina is Yavan. And I forgot the exact word for the language. Oh, here, it's called Yevanitika. You know how there's Yiddish, there's Ladino? Greek Jews are so old, they had their Greek Jewish language, like their Greek Yiddish, is called Yevanitika. So Yavan is Greece, and it's because of this area called Ion. Ion, Yavan. And so you have a verse already in Bereshit, in Genesis, Ubnei Yavan, Elisha, Tarshish, Kitim, Vedodanim. Some of the islands like Rhodes and Crete are also named. Yeah? I think it's a very old Greek word, and it's a region in western Greece, I believe, Ion, and that's why you have in downtown New York, it's called Kehila Kedosha Ionina, or with a J, Janina. But yeah, it's the old word in Hebrew for Greece. You know, you ever sing on Hanukkah, Yavanim, Yavanim, Nikbetzu alai? So Yavan is Greece. And it's because of this area that's called in Old Greek, Ion. So it's Yavan, Ion. It actually has the same letters. You have a sort of a Yud, a Vav, and a Nun. But in Greek, my ancient Greek is not perfect, I must confess here. But it's called Ion. So it's mentioned already in Bereshit. I see that I see some people here. We actually have participants on Zoom. With more connections, so Greek Jews are actually, they go back more than 22 or 2300 years. We're going to see. So that period of time before the destruction of the temple is, I think, to me, the most fascinating thing, because it's not like Jews living in Persia or in Babylon. These are not Jews who are expelled there. These are Jews who voluntarily leave a semi-sovereign land of Israel and they go to Greece. And so there are Jews living in Greece already 200-300 years before the destruction of the Second Temple, before Greece is even controlled by Rome. So they're called the Romanitim, but they actually predate Romans. They speak Yevanitika because they're Yevani Jews. The whole story of Hanukkah is based on the idea that there were Jews who wanted to be Hellenized Jews, and there were Jews who wanted to be non-Hellenized Jews. And I assure you that the number of Jews who wanted to be Hellenized Jews was not tiny. And a lot of those Jews may have said, wow, what a great culture Greece is, and maybe I should go pick up and live in Athens. And the oldest synagogue in the world, I know I've said this before, but I keep on learning about older ones. The oldest synagogue in the world is in Athens. There's a synagogue in Athens, a floor that was uncovered with a menorah inscribed. I think the last time I said this is the oldest synagogue in the world was about Italy, so not far. An even older synagogue is found in Athens. And it's fair to assume that a bunch of Jews went to Greece to live there even 200 years before the destruction of the Second Temple. And so these were, when we say Hellenized Jews, it's not like saying a Jew who converted to Christianity necessarily. It's not like a Jew who said, I want to have nothing to do with Judaism. It could be a Jew who said, look, I don't mind the shows and the whatever shows the Greeks were putting on, whatever Greek tragedies were playing in theater that night. It doesn't mean that they abandoned Judaism. So they wanted to be Jews, but they also wanted to be Greeks. And so it's not fair to assume, it's a fact that several of them, enough to build a synagogue, lived in Athens already 200 years before the destruction of the temple. It's even fair to assume that when the story of Hanukkah was happening in the land of Israel, these guys were living happily ever after in Athens. And they had to get the memo a bunch of years later that there's this holiday about our victory over the Greeks. But there were Hellenized Jews living there were plenty of Jews living in Greece at hundreds of years before the destruction of the temple. So just a few quotes from the Bible. In fact, not only the Bible, the Chumash, meaning the first part of the Bible, which is as old as it gets. When I say Greece, by the way, I don't only mean mainland Greece. It's also Rhodes and Crete. There are communities of Jews dating back, again, before 2,000 years, living in these islands. So Jews are living in this area for very long. Another verse is from the book of Ezekiel, Yavan tuval v'meshech hemarochlaich. So there's this mentioning of Yavan, of Greece. And here's a more confrontational verse from the book of Zechariah. V'orarti banaich Tzion al banaich Yavan. I will awaken your sons, Zion, to go to war with the sons of Yavan, of Greece. So the tensions are there a long way back. But the reason for the tensions between Jews and Greeks is because there are also many similarities. And I want to read you a letter that speaks about a meeting between a Jew and Aristotle. This is around the 4th century BCE. There's a letter about a fellow, I never pronounce the Greek names great, so you'll forgive me, especially the ones with CH, but Clerichus. He speaks about a meeting between Aristotle and a Jew that he meets in that region. By the way, it doesn't have to be just Greece that has a lot of Jews in back in the day. It's also Asia Minor, which is Turkey today. So here's this description of the meeting between Aristotle and a Jew. Well, said Aristotle, the man was a Jew of Koel, Syria. These Jews were derived from the Indian philosophers and were called by the Indians Kalani. Now this man, who entertained a large circle of friends and was on his way from the interior to the coast, not only spoke Greek, but had the soul of a Greek. And I think a lot of the tensions between Jews and Greeks came from some similarities. The old philosophers used to say that the Jews are a nation of philosophers. And so there were similarities. There's this entire nation, I mean the Jews, that are dedicated to intellectual pursuits. That wasn't common in the ancient world. And so there were these similarities. Of course, we didn't like the Greek version of what a perfect human being is. We didn't believe in, the same value that they gave to athletics and a bunch of other topics, and obviously the topic of faith, where they believed in multiple gods. But you have the similarities. So for Aristotle to say that the Jews have a soul of a Greek shows you that there were these similarities between the Jews and the Greeks. Going forward, there's letters even between the people of Sparta and the people of Judea. So there's a letter between a fellow named Yochanan in the book of Maccabees and the people of Sparta. And so there is this regional connection between Jews and Greeks already pretty early on. In fact, already in the days of Alexander the Great, you have these Jewish communities that are moving to Alexandria, Egypt. In fact, some of the traditions say that Greek Jews came not directly from Israel, but came from Jews who were living in Alexandria, Egypt. And so this is an amazing thing to me because it's a Jewish diaspora before we were a diaspora. Jews living in Persia, Jews living in Babylon were forced there, they're expelled there. Jews living in Greece, 200 BCE, these are Jews who were Jews of the diaspora. And I think that's something I'm going to speak a little bit about what the series taught me, but I think we sometimes underestimate how much of a people of diaspora we are. If you have Jews 2,300 years ago who are going not only to live in Alexandria, right near Israel, but then go to live in Greece, we're people who were able to hold ourselves together, with obviously a very heavy price, in many countries for thousands of years. And so you have this connection between the Spartans and the Jews already a long time ago. Another thing that happens is one of the Kohanim Gedolim, the Kohen Gadol in Jerusalem was a very political appointment. And so like we've seen, I think with France, there was one person who was expelled there from Herod's family. One of the Kohanim Gedolim is sent to Sparta. He runs away from Antiochus, from this, Antiochus from the Greek. He goes away to Sparta, and you can imagine that if you're a Jew who runs away to a town, I'm not saying they all bought OU kosher matzahs, but there had to be some kind of community to receive you. I don't know if they sold borscht or gefilte fish, or they had a kosher deli. But if you're a Jew and you're running away to a specific city, so if you're a Jew running away, long before the temple is destroyed to Greece, there's probably some people there that will be able to, as they say, to kibbutz with you, or to do something Jewish with you. As the years go on, Jews obviously get a major influx under tragic circumstances. Eventually, when the temple is destroyed, many thousands of Jews are sent all around the Mediterranean, and many Jewish slaves end up in Greece, and you have more and more Jewish life taking place there. But yeah, there's Jews living there for a very long time, and you have some of these synagogues. I believe that in the case of Italy, the synagogue that we spoke about was not facing Jerusalem. A lot of the rituals that are associated today with synagogue came later after the destruction of the temple, but Jews did congregate in houses of worship, and most commonly these houses of worship have a menorah, so we can tell, and you have at the front a Torah scroll. Actually, I believe in the synagogue in the Golan Heights, there's a Torah scroll in the back of the synagogue. But yeah, there's Jews living there for a very long time. Years go by and the Roman Empire splits. What does it split into? You have the Rome version and you have the Byzantine version. Jews do not do well under the Byzantine version because it's much more restrictive and it is much more oppressive. And so the Byzantines try and force Jews to convert to Christianity, which reminds me that if I forgot a major thing, and that is the mentions of Jews in Christian sources. I'm not an expert on Christian sources, but one of the places that the early preachers of Christianity go, and it's mentioned in the New Testament or the various different Christian scriptures, is that they go to convert the Jews of Greece. It's kind of a crazy concept. When you want to know where Jews lived 2,000 years ago, you go and see where they were preaching to convert them. Because originally the idea of the early Christians was to convert mainly Jews. But then later they decided to go public or to go global. But basically, wherever these preachers, the students of Jesus would go, they would go to Jewish communities. And so they write in the New Testament about going to Greece. And so that's another sort of piece of evidence where you see there are Jews living in Greece already that long ago. He's going to the synagogue in Greece. Spoiler alert, not a major success story. Meaning, yes, there are some Jews who end up joining Christianity there, But between that and the Byzantine Empire trying to force conversions, Jews in Greece generally reject Christianity and do not convert, even when they have to live under very difficult circumstances. Again, Greek Jewry becomes this cosmopolitan place where Jews come from all over. And you have some scholars. I don't know if anyone knows, there's a series of books called Lekach Tov. It's sort of like a midrashic work. And so this midrash Lekach Tov is written by a rabbi named Rabbi Tuvia ben Eliezer. And he lives in the 11th century in Greece. And he is he's a great scholar. So Greece becomes this like pretty quiet, no major news. Everyone's living their life and things are good. In the 1300s, once Jews flee Ashkenaz, whether it's the Black Plague, pogroms, or it's the Crusades, Jews from Ashkenaz start fleeing. That's when you see Jews coming to Lithuania and other parts of Eastern Europe. So these Jews also flee there. Even Jews, actually, interestingly, who flee Hungary and come to Greece, and they stay there with the, so in 1376, you have the first Ashkenazi Jews arriving in Greece. And I think what I found fascinating is that no matter who it was that came to Greece, there's sort of this general culture of Sephardic Jewry that ends up being the dominant one. And so no matter what happens, there's not, you don't see multiple kinds of prayer, multiple kinds of synagogue. There's pretty much a unified version, even though you'll see soon there's Ladino, there's Yevanitiki, there's some Ashkenazi Jews. They sort of mold into one community. I see we're getting a comment. The Jew, I guess, the Jews, so this is from one of our viewers. The Jew Saul became the Apostle Paul. Paul, I guess they made a quick switch, who preached in the Salonika synagogue, Jewish light, and he's Judaism light, I guess, or Jewish light, no circumcision or kashrut. He was rejected and became the archetypical anti-Semite. We got here one of the comments. So yeah, so this guy Saul Paul would go to the Jews. Wherever he went, he would go to the Jews, and then when the Jews rejected him, then he decided to become some kind of anti-Semite. But it shows you how far back Jewish life dates there. In 1492, there's a huge influx of Spanish Jews. Very interesting, though, there's something about the region. Greece is really part of Europe, but the Ashkenazi version of Judaism never really picks up in Greece, never. Even though, there are all kinds of groups of immigrants, Ashkenazi type of Judaism never picks up. And if you ask me, the reason for this is because the Jews in Greece are so connected to where Jews were indigenous. They're so close to the land of Israel, and they have a group of the Romaniots, the Jews who are literally there from the time of the destruction of the temple and even before. And so to give them some kind of Judaism that was, exile after exile after exile, when they are close to the source, is difficult, which is why they stick with more of the Sephardic version. It's fascinating. I listened to what the Greek pronunciation, there's different pronunciations of when you read the Torah, the Shema. Fascinating thing about the Greek version is the only other ones I see this with is the Yemenites, both of which are considered to be the oldest Jewish diasporas, one of the oldest, and the Greeks and Yemenites are the only ones I know of that they do when there's a taf. You can say like Shabbat or Shabbos. So the Ashkenazim say a taf as a s, and Sephardic Jews say a t, right? So it's Shabbat and it's Shabbos. It's a t or a s. But Yemenite Jews and Greek Jews are the only ones who do it as a th, as a th. That's why a lot of them Thessaloniki, or it's spelled with a th. So the Greek nusach has a ta as a th, which is exactly the same as the Yemenites. So it's interesting that these two ancient communities have that th, and it never picks up, the Ashkenazi Jewry never picks up there because they are so close to the source that they don't have these more cumbersome versions. Finally, later on, the Ottomans, so just in terms of Greek Jews, so the Spanish Jews that arrived there end up being the dominant group, and actually Ladino takes over to this day for Yevanitiki. It's a sad thing, but Yevanitiki, which is the Yiddish of Greek in Greece, is a language that's almost extinct. I think in the 1980s, there were about 30, 40 people who know it. It's considered an endangered language. Very few people know it. It's what our ancestors spoke 2,000 years ago when they were in Greece. It was the Jewish Greek. And so, but that got replaced by Ladino and the Sephardic community coming from Spain. That became sort of the big deal. The Ottomans take over and they love the Jews. They invite Jews from Spain. Fun fact, the Jews of Greece then become what's the biggest job if you're a Jew there? What do you think? I mean, there's Jews, different capacities, different professions in Yemen. The Jews are the best tailors. The Jews are the tailors for the nobility. So it's interesting. So every Jewish diaspora has its thing. And so the Jews who moved to the Ottoman Empire, especially who are in Greece, they're the tailors of the nobility. And maybe that's why there are so many, there's a few Jewish designers. You have Ralph Lauren and Joseph Abboud, and I don't know if they come from Greece, but that was considered to be the very Jewish profession, to be a tailor. And so Jews become successful, they settle down, they have a good time under the Ottoman Empire. And that means that when the Greeks try and fight against the Ottomans for independence, the Jews actually usually side with the Ottomans because they have been pretty good to us. As the years go by, in the late 1800s, you have 11,000 Jews living in Rhodes. And these Jewish communities are flourishing, not only in Greece, but also Rhodes, Crete, and other islands in the area. As the years go by, Greece becomes sort of a nation state in the early 1900s, when you have a lot of independent European countries seeking independence and sort of a national unity. And there's a huge pressure on the Jewish schools because the Greeks want to close them down, and they ask them to start teaching everything in Greek. So it's a big debate. Eventually, they come to some kind of settlement where the Jewish subjects are taught by Jews, and then all the other subjects are taught in strict Greek. And it's sort of a re-Hellenization, a replay of Hanukkah, just without the glorious end. Later, a fellow in 1936 takes over, like an ultra-nationalist in Greek. His name is Metaxas, and he wipes out basically Jewish education, which unfortunately was not a big difference in the sense that then comes the Holocaust. The Germans take over Greece. They don't subjugate the Jews to the same kind of torments in terms of the same exact torture that the Jews in Poland were suffering, for example. But part of the reason is that the Jews, the Greeks, have a very decent relationship with the Jews. So as long as the local population is not as evil and vicious as it was in other countries, the experience wasn't bad. Did that prevent people from dying? No, because eventually the Germans start rounding up Jews and sending them to Auschwitz. And it just gives you an idea of the evil of the Germans, because not only did they send away the Jews of Saloniki, which is a community with 60,000 people, but if there's this ancient Jewish community on a small island, they make sure to get them out. The psychotic evil of the German Nazis was incredible. So they're taking these, they're like weeding out as every single community that they can. And here we come actually to a tragic story of the tale of three rabbis. So the rabbi of Saloniki, who comes from more where Ukraine is now, Galicia, he is sent, he's first sent to Bergen-Belsen, I believe. Then he's brought back. He's brought back to be the head of the Judenrat and to sort of collaborate with the Germans to make sure that things are going to be okay. And he assures the Jews of Saloniki that everything's going to be okay as long as you work with the Germans. And he promises them that life is going to be good in the camps that they're sent to. And he himself later gets killed in one of these camps, only after he gives everyone he gives the Germans all the lists of the Jews and convinces all the Jews that he can to go on these trains that are Auschwitz bound. Interestingly, there's two other rabbis, and to me this is just sort of an interesting phenomenon. There's two other rabbis who are Greek rabbis. And when the SS come in and give them the same shtick, the same spiel that they lie to every Jewish community, where they say, oh, don't worry, just give us all the names, work with us, we'll work with you. These rabbis were smarter than the Germans, and they didn't even begin falling for it. They said, no problem, give us 12 hours. They took 12 hours. They went to the archives of the Jewish community. They burned and destroyed every single record that existed there. And they ran to every Jewish community, every community that was under their auspices, and they told everyone, guys, run for the mountains. And it worked. Unfortunately, these rabbis were in the smaller communities. And so after the war, you see something in Greece that you don't see in many other communities. The Jewish community right away files. They didn't know that the rabbi of Saloniki was also killed because they thought he was a German collaborator. They file lawsuits for crimes against humanity or whatever against their rabbi because they know better. They know that there were rabbis who did have the insight to destroy all the records and to save the members of their community. Doesn't mean that everyone was saved, but a significant amount was saved, and I think that's just a fascinating concept. Today, after the Holocaust, many Greek Jews, even actually in the 1930s, many Greek Jews moved to Israel, and you have a large Jewish Greek community in Israel. You have downtown New York, the Kehila Kedosha Anshe Yonina, which is both a synagogue and a museum. You can go visit there. And the Greek community is much smaller than it was, but it's just important to note that this is the oldest Jewish diaspora in the sense that some of them have been probably in Greece. I don't know if it's the same people, but you have a continuous Jewish community for 2,200, 2,300, maybe 400 years, right? Aristotle has this conversation with a Jew there. And so it's just not a huge community, but it carries with it a very, very, very heavy weight. As we come to the conclusion, because Passover and Purim are coming, and Bezrat Hashem will have great topics for that as well. I'll be speaking about Passover and Purim. As we conclude this series on Jewish geography, first of all, before anything, I wanted to thank you guys here and the people who are watching on Zoom, because it would not be possible without you. So I thank you really for this journey through Jewish history. And Bezrat Hashem, hopefully after Purim, I'll have books with the topic of Jews of the Nobel, hopefully all written up and ready to give everyone here and whoever wants. So that's one thing. The other thing is I just wanted to summarize what we see just in general from the concept of from the various diasporas that we've seen. So number one is that life in the diaspora for Jews is much older than we thought. I think something that we see Jewish diaspora as, okay, we lived in Jerusalem, then we lived in Babylon, we came back, then Jews were, and we sort of by the year 500-600, we think that Jews were living already in a diaspora life. No, there were Jews living diaspora life probably 300 BCE. There were Jews Jewish life was the only form of religious national life that was able to exist as a minority so much longer before we even lost our sovereignty on the land of Israel. So that's number one, is don't underestimate Jewish life in diaspora. Obviously, our national strength, our source of spiritual strength, and the heart and soul of the Jewish people are the land of Israel. But it's important also to recognize there were Jews living in diaspora life for very, very long. The other thing is, I think the concept of a synagogue is much older than we thought. The fact that you have this old synagogue in Athens, you have synagogues in Italy that are so much older than the time the temple was destroyed, teaches you really of the essence of a synagogue as what we call it, a Beit Knesset, a house of gathering. Yes, it's a house of worship, but it's also a house where Jews would gather. I think it teaches you the power of the Beit Knesset. And another important lesson, looking at communities from China to France to Morocco, etc., is that the strongest source of strength for a Jewish community. What is the strongest source of strength for a Jewish community? Obviously, at this point, this is already an opinion. The strongest source of strength, sticking together, but also connection to other Jewish communities. The ability to remain connected to other Jewish communities is at the foundation of the strength of the community. You look at the Chinese Jewish community, where for centuries they did stick together, but they didn't have a connection to the outside world. That was a community that didn't pick up the way other Jewish communities have. And so the ability to stay connected with Jews, even if they're not in the country that we're living in, even Jews who are in different countries, to have an exchange of ideas, of culture, of learning, etc. Food is vital to have. You have to have this kind of exchange. The other lesson I believe is learned is that the number one strength of a community after being connected, or it's part of it, is having a very, very strong spiritual life. Whether it's the study of Torah like you had in Lithuania, whether it's the Hasidic movement of warmth and love and passion for Judaism, and whatever it may be, having a very, very strong electric relationship with our religion, with our faith, that is always renewing itself in terms of carrying people on, is also essential. You cannot remain parv or neutral about your Judaism and have a 600-year success. You have to be like the Jews of Spain, the Jews of Morocco, the Jews of Lithuania, Jews that really were invigorated constantly by new experiences of engagement in Torah, tradition, a passion for Judaism. I think that's a very, very important lesson. And finally, I hope I don't get flack for this, but it has a good side to it. And that is that having low-grade anti-Semitism, I'm not talking, is not the end of Jewish life. Having no anti-Semitism is not necessarily the secret to successful Jewish life. It's important to know now, because sometimes people say, oh my gosh, there's a bunch of anti-Semites, it's the end. It's not the end. As they say, we've gone through Pharaoh, we've gone through Haman, we'll pass through these too. Again, obviously, you have levels of anti-Semitism, like the Spanish Inquisition, like the Nazis, which are not things you can get through. But nonetheless, having some kind of anti-Semitism doesn't mean we should say, oh no, it's over, it's all over. Usually we end up having the last laugh, as they say. They tried to kill us, God saved us, now let's sit and eat. So usually it ends up being usually we don't have to have that kind of worry. So Bezrat Hashem, we should be blessed with many, many, many more years of just happiness and health for all Jews in all communities. Really, if anyone has a question about Jewish life in Greece, thank you. I see some of the comments here.
I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm on remote. You said that the Greek Jews kept the Sephardic rituals, but the original Jews were from Israel or Alexandria, so that wasn't really Sephardic, wasn't it? Like Mizrahi?
Correct.
Or
100%. So you have the Romanioti Jews. Romaniot is the people who are speaking in Yevaniki, I believe is the word for it, and they are not the same as Sephardic. They exist long, long before Jews arrived from Spain. They are called Romaniot Jews, and actually some of them remained distinct. There are several family of Romaniot Jews that lasted definitely into the 1900s. That is not the same as Sephardic. At the same time, what I did mean is that to the exclusion of Ashkenaz type of Jewry, meaning when the Sephardic Jews come from Spain and Ladino becomes the most dominant language and culture in Greece, that does pick up. What does not pick up is when Jews come from Hungary or Ashkenaz, that doesn't end up being a sort of a big branch of Greek Jews. Even though at the same time there are in Saloniki Jews who are from all over, and they have printing houses and they print many Ashkenaz books, but the core of the I just meant Sephardic as a non-Ashkenaz, not
right,
not
okay.
that the Romaniots were the same as the Ladino.
Thank you. Did the Greeks save the Jews like they did in Bulgaria and Denmark? Like, was there a movement to save the Jews during the Holocaust?
It's a good question. So there's two factors for that. First of all, the Germans were in Greece much longer before they were in it wasn't like a short stint. They were there from 1941. And so there was more time to be there. At the same time, so you don't have too many stories that I know of Greeks saving Jews, but you also don't have the same kind of viciousness that you see in Poland, in Lithuania, in Hungary. You don't see the Greeks turning on I mentioned the story of Albert Burla. So his mom hid with her sister, who was married to a Christian Greek. And so you don't see the same kind of racial combing through,
Right.
who's half Jewish, whose grandparent is Jewish. That doesn't happen in Greece. Of course, the Jews who are living in Saloniki, who are living in Rhodes, who are living around the synagogue, who are easily identified as Jews, are picked up. In fact, many of the Jews, like I mentioned in Saloniki, ended up being turned into the Nazis because of the Judenrat mistakenly turning in the lists of all the Jews. But you definitely do not see
yet, Rabbi, 87% of the Jews of Greece perished, which was the largest percentage of casualty. On the other hand, 95% of the Danish Jews survived. 100% of the Albanian Jews, a Muslim country, survived because those instances, the Jews were seen as part and parcel of the nation. In Greece, that was not the case. To this day, they are considered as the other. That's why there are frequent eruptions of anti-Semitism and assaults on Jewish cemeteries, on synagogues, and on Holocaust memorials. On the other hand, the observation can be made that where in Salonika they seem to be so non-assimilated, they were much more in danger. In the case of my own parents, we survived by hiding in the mountains where I was born in 1943 by the good graces of a Christian couple, childless couple, that cooperated and collaborated with my father in business. And he was a Romagnot. He married a Sephardic Jew from Salonika and survived. Her family perished in Auschwitz. So it's a very mixed bag of pluses and minuses. Unfortunately, as I mentioned in the chat, today Greece remains the foremost anti-Semitic country in Europe today, and it was the only country that voted against the birth of a Jewish state in Resolution 181 in 1947.
If I can interrupt, so because I want to make sure we realize how honored so you are from a Greek Jewish family.
Yes, I'm Joy's father. I'm a Romagnot on my father's side, and Sephardi on my mother's side. Yes.
You know what? I can't see you here on the screen, but I gotta say it's just an extraordinary honor. So we have a Jew who's from a Romagnot family. I wonder, do you speak Yevani?
I do a lot of public speaking for the Holocaust Museum and for that number. So,
all right. What's your name, if I may ask? So if anyone wants to go on your tour or hear more.
Yes. I am.
Want to share your name?
I'm Professor Emeritus Asher Matathias.
Asher Matathias.
How about that, Matathias? Oh boy, I celebrate Hanukkah in my house every day.
In your own way, Matathias. Who knows? How far you go back? Wow. Okay, so what a way to conclude.
Thank you, Rabbi.
We have here someone who's from a Romagnot family, and do you know some Yevaniki? That's my next question.
Yes.
You do. Wow.
Yes.
Are you able to say a sentence or a Jewish anything? Because Yevaniki I saw is an extinct language almost.
I speak. No, not the Yavanit, but Greek, modern Greek.
Oh, modern Greek. So there's a language Romaniot spoke called Yavaniki, which is the Jewish version of Greek.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And that
wow.
did not filter down to me. By the way, my father did not speak Ladino, but because he was courting my mother, it was made a condition because his prospective in-laws did not speak Greek well enough. Greek.
Wow.
Salonika did not come under the suzerainty of
Yes.
Greece till
I know.
1912.
Wow.
So because of love, he learned Ladino, but unfortunately, within a year or two, they were taken away. So they never
Wow.
had the chance to interact.
Wow. Look,
Yeah.
I cannot say anything other than wow. It's an amazing honor to have here a Jew from a Romaniot family able to share the experience. That's pretty amazing. Thank you for sharing.
Thank
Rabbi,
you.
say
Yeah.
one thing. It also, a lot of the Jews that were taken from the islands by the Nazis had that long boat ride to Athens, to the mainland, and then a longer and in hard conditions, and then a train ride to Auschwitz or wherever they were sent. And it was a really hard thing. And they also suffered at the camps because they spoke Ladino. And
if I could just add on to that, so the Jews who suffered, the Jews who were taken to Auschwitz from Greece, they perished at a higher rate because of the fact that they had a longer trip. B, they were not nearly used to the brutal weather of the Polish winter, and they all also stuck with their family. The idea that you should run away and leave your family behind was unthinkable for them because they were with their family. There's a very famous movie that came out, I think, in the 80s about a guy, his name, I think, was Shmuel Aroch. His last name was Aroch, and he was the boxer of Auschwitz. The Germans took this Greek Jewish boxer, and he was undefeated actually until like 1960. He never lost a game, and he was a Greek Jew. But other than him, Greek Jews perished at a higher rate in the concentration camps because they were just the weather and many other factors. So
language was a big problem for them.
And they didn't speak the language that other people spoke. Yes.
The Yiddish could
other Jews there spoke.
But the Ladinos could not understand anyone.
Yeah, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. And like I said, the fact that the Germans went to all these little islands and dragged out 200 Jews there, 200 is just a testimony to how brutal they were. But at the same time, it's also important that we recognize the extraordinary heritage of Greek Jews, where you have these Jews that literally have the oldest synagogue in the world where they are, and they carry a tradition.
Rabbi, only 1,200 Jews return to reclaim their shattered lives. And the reaction of the squatters to their property in Salonika was, why are you back? Why?
Yeah, and by the way, let me echo what you just said before. According to the ADL, in terms of opinions of anti-Semitism, Greece does rank as most anti-Semitic in Europe. Which is not the competition there is stiff. So yeah, in terms of opinions, the Greeks definitely held or continue to hold very anti-Semitic opinions. All right, I see another mention. Prince Alice of Greece, the Queen of England's mother-in-law, saved the Jewish family in Athens. That's also true, and she's recognized in Yad Vashem. So the mother-in-law of Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth, did actually save Jews in Greece, and there were a few other Chasidei Umot Olam who are recognized in Yad Vashem. All right, we have to close here, but really thank you to everyone. And Bezrat Hashem, next week the topic is the archaeology of Purim. We'll be speaking about the archaeology of Megillat Esther, so also a lot of history of Jews in Persia. I'd like to thank everyone that was here, and especially Professor Merethias, who comes from the Romaniot family and has probably a lot more to share. Thank you so much, everyone. Laila Tov, thank you.